My name is Mya Breitbart. I'm a professor at the University of South Florida within the College of Marine Science, and I study the virome. This conference focuses on the global virome, including viruses that infect humans, all living plants and animals, viruses that infect members of the microbiomes of those plant and animals, as well as viruses that are spread throughout all of Earth's ecosystems. And we want to look at this really as a holistic system in order to understand not only how viruses are functioning within their individual hosts, but the full suite of interactions between hosts and the environment.
How does virome research differ from virology in that context? And what information and insights are gained from studying the collection of viruses out there versus a single one?
Traditionally, virology has really focused a lot on viruses that cause disease, whether it's in plants or animals or any other hosts. But what adding virome studies to this has done is shown us that really there are viruses just absolutely everywhere. And these sort of small number of very bad guys that we hear about all the time on the news aren't necessarily representative of the majority of viruses that are out there. So in just every teaspoon of seawater, there are millions of viruses, and most of the viruses that are present in the environment infect bacteria because bacteria are the most numerous hosts. And we're learning a ton about their diversity in the environment. They're very important as both sources of mortality for various hosts, as well as for evolutionary processes, including horizontal gene transfer and selection.
What kind of trajectories do these viruses cause bacteria or other hosts to take when it comes to evolution? What drivers are they?
We know that viruses carry a lot of important genes. So, for example, several toxin encoding genes are encoded on viruses. So that's a case where having a viral infection could lead to maybe human disease getting worse. But we also know that viruses tend to be very host specific when they're infecting their hosts. And so this has been exploited, for example, with recent phage therapy cases to kind of shift from the bad guys to the good guys.
What other ways do viruses impact different host animals or plants or other organisms out there?
Pretty much all organisms that we've looked at have one or more, in many cases more, viruses that infect them. And we're kind of, with new methods, we're expanding this knowledge all of the time. So if you can think of an organism that we don't have any described viruses for, it's probably not because they don't have any viruses. It's just because no one's gone looking yet. And we've tended as a society to focus on things that cause visible signs of disease, whether it's with ourselves, whether it's with livestock or agricultural crops. And that's really only looking at a small proportion of the total diversity that's out there. So for example, if you're considering plants, you also need to think about what's out there in native plant populations and things like weeds. Those serve as reservoirs of diversity. And the more studies that we do, we're finding a lot of viruses in organisms that don't have any signs of disease. And so in some cases, this could mean that, we're just not seeing the disease. For example, if we find a virus in a copepod, a small zooplankton that's found in the ocean, how do you know if it's not feeling well, right? That's a tricky one. But we also know that there are a lot of viruses out there that are either mutualistic or either not causing any negative symptoms or might change their interactions with the host under different conditions. So for example, there are some viruses in plants that can confer drought resistance, other potential qualities that would help them survive changing conditions.
Wow, that's really interesting. So are there implications for agriculture and things that might be found with these virome studies?
Yes, absolutely. I think anytime you're looking at optimizing a system, whether that's the human body and our health, or if it's an agricultural system, we need to understand the role of all of the pieces in that. So if you think about humans, understanding the viruses that are found in built environments is very important for understanding kind of what we come in our interactions with. Um, Also, wastewater, how that's treated, how that's discharged in the environment, all of the environmental water sources that we're interacting with, as well as even our food and drink and the air that we breathe.
Is there any evidence or any studies that follow what viruses might be contaminated or transferred from us to the environment, back and forth, those sorts of interactions and consequences?
Most of the studies have focused on specific pathogens. We can then track it through all of its environmental reservoirs and kind of, understanding what its fate and persistence is through different systems. But we tend to be looking only at one specific virus at a time. We can look at what types of viruses persisted throughout that treatment, and in some cases identify things that are not just necessarily human pathogens, but could also infect things like plants or insects that are out in the environment.
Interesting. It looks like from the pictures on your wall, you do a bit of marine virome research. Can you tell us a bit about what viruses you find in the oceans and what impact those have on ocean health and ecology?
Yeah, so I think whenever people think of the oceans, they kind of think like these pictures behind me of beautiful coral reefs and sea turtles and dolphins and fish, and all of those things are certainly there. But what's really at the baseline, at the core of ocean ecosystems, are microbes. And so a lot of the primary production, the carbon fixation in the oceans, is done by bacteria, and all the bacteria out there also have viruses that infect them. So viruses end up playing a very important role in carbon and nutrient cycling in not only the oceans, but also soils and just every ecosystem that you can think of. They're very active in terms of both lysing their hosts as well as transferring genes around. I think the field is very much at a discovery phase right now. So, for example, we recently found a virus in a seagrass that's very abundant in Tampa Bay, in the area that I live in. And we found this virus in plants that look perfectly healthy. And so those lead you then to more questions like, how widespread are these viruses? Does their infection have any negative or positive effects on the host in different conditions? Are there interactions between viruses and other members of the microbiome? When people say microbiome, they tend to really focus on the bacteria right now. And without considering the viruses, both those that infect whatever host or ecosystem you're looking at, as well as those that infect the microbiome.
Do you have any other examples of how viromes might be commensal or beneficial to the ecosystem?
They're generally an integral part of every healthy ecosystem. And so viruses are very important for carbon and nutrient cycling, for maintaining a balance between organisms, for selecting for different hosts and kind of maintaining diversity in the environment. And so we certainly know this for ecosystems as a whole, but drilling into these individual virus host interactions is a lot trickier.
Are there ways we can use this knowledge to help the environment recover or maintain its resilience?
This is where I think kind of having an idea of what the healthy baseline is really critical, because if we don't understand on a healthy coral reef, how the viruses are interacting, plays between, let's say, between algae that might be overgrowing the coral and between the coral themselves, it's going to be really hard for us to apply this knowledge in sort of a therapeutic or a forward-moving scenario. A lot of times you can have things that are commensal under certain conditions that can become pathogenic under other conditions. And so we really need to consider what's there under all sorts of conditions, and then how the host immune system is dealing with or not dealing with those viruses under a given maybe set of stress conditions.
Interesting. Great. So then where do you see the field heading in the next few years? And are there any new technologies or new applications of current technologies that will help you get there?
This is actually one of the reasons that I'm most excited about this meeting, because I think it's going to bring together people from a lot of fields that don't necessarily interact with each other. I think a lot of people have stumbled into the virome, so meaning that these aren't people who've studied viruses for their career and they've done some sort of sequencing. Maybe it's of a whole microbiome sample, or maybe they're looking at environmental samples, and all of a sudden they're coming up with viral sequences, right? And it sort of forces you to be, I guess, like a Renaissance virologist, because you might not be going and looking for a specific type of virus, but then it's what you get back in your sequence data. You need to kind of go and learn everything about what's known about those viruses. A lot of times we're really finding things that are weakly related to known viruses, and so then we're kind of making inferences about how they behave. What we need to do is pull together the expertise of what I would call real virologists, people who have been studying model viruses and model systems for a long time, combine that with people who are looking more at the whole system. So immunologists who are maybe considering, the host immune system's interaction with the viruses, and then also with the microbiome field, because the viruses some of them are infecting those bacteria, and it's a multi-level system. You can even think about bringing in things like fungi. Like, we really need to be thinking about it as a whole perspective. And I think by combining these fields that traditionally don't really talk to each other. So plant virologists use kind of a whole suite of methods that human virologists don't, and vice versa. There aren't a lot of model systems for studying the virome, and I think we are definitely in need of new ones as we expand into different environments and maybe not traditionally pathogenic viral types.
Speaking more to that, what kinds of collaborations do you see coming out of this meeting, and where will that take the field?
I think we're merging a lot of very disparate fields. So we're bringing together people who tend to study human viruses with people who study marine viruses or plant viruses or all these different systems. We're also kind of merging the phage biology field, which tends to be separate from many other aspects of health and disease. I think we're trying also to bring together people who are interested in new technologies and techniques like phage therapy and applying those in human systems, as well as people who are doing kind of large cohort studies to understand which viruses correlate with various health and disease states. We'll also have some computational biologists. And so I think one of the places that the field often gets stuck is at this barrier between dealing with these mountains of sequence data and performing experiments in the lab or in the field. And so hopefully we'll learn new techniques that people are using for doing that. And really, I think, start to see the connections and the interactions between all these different facets of the virome. I think it's very much a changing landscape that we need to both understand from an evolutionary perspective and understanding, how things started out and where the viruses were found, as well as for being able to predict future interactions and things such as developing resistance in phage therapy treatments. There are absolutely cases known where one virus might make a host more susceptible to another virus, right? Or getting resistant to one virus might make you more susceptible to another virus. And so understanding how these forces are playing together will be really interesting.
Do you have any other thoughts or comments about what gaps in the current field this conference will fill and or advances that will come out of the meeting?
Yeah, I don't really know of any other conferences like this, which is why I'm so excited to be a part of it. It's going to really bring together people that don't normally interact, that are probably stumbling onto the same things in multiple different systems. And I think by leveraging that knowledge together, just by literally having these people kind of in the same conference center for a week, I think we're going to make a lot of advances and learn things about how to attack these problems from a more multidimensional focus.